My sister walked up to me at my 30th birthday dinner, dropped a DNA testing kit on the table in front of all our relatives, and said with a smirk that made my blood boil, "Here's your present. Maybe this will finally explain why you've always been another man's mistake. Maybe you'll discover which stranger actually spawned you, because we all know you don't belong in this family." The entire room erupted in laughter. My cousins, my aunts, my uncles. All of them laughing like she'd just told the funniest joke they'd ever heard. My parents sat there in complete silence, refusing to defend me, refusing to tell her to stop, just staring at their plates like cowards. My sister Jessica thought I was powerless. She thought humiliating me publicly would break me, would send me running from that dinner in tears. Instead, I picked up that DNA kit, looked her dead in the eyes, and smiled. Because what she didn't know was that I'd been waiting for exactly this moment. I took that test. I discovered the truth she thought would destroy me. And I used those results to file a $2 million lawsuit that seized every major asset she owned. When that judge ruled in my favor and ordered her to pay, watching her face crumble into absolute devastation was the sweetest revenge I've ever tasted. I'm Vivian, and this is the story of how my sister's cruelty became the weapon I used to destroy her financially and expose the lies our entire family had been living for 30 years. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the mockery at my birthday wasn't isolated cruelty, it was the culmination of 3 decades of being treated like I didn't belong. Growing up, I always felt different from my family. My sister Jessica had my father's dark hair and sharp features. She had his temperament, his mannerisms, even his laugh. They were mirror images of each other. I looked nothing like either of my parents. My hair was lighter, my features softer, my build completely different. But more than physical differences, I never fit the family dynamic. Jessica was the golden child who could do no wrong. I was the afterthought, the one whose achievements were dismissed, whose presence was merely tolerated. When Jessica got straight A's, there were celebrations and gifts. When I got straight A's, which I did consistently, there was barely acknowledgement. When Jessica made the cheerleading squad, my parents threw her a party. When I was accepted to a prestigious university on a full academic scholarship, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and went back to watching television. The favoritism was so obvious that relatives commented on it. My grandmother once asked my mother directly why she treated me so differently from Jessica. My mother's response? Every child is different. Some require more attention than others. Like I was the difficult one for simply existing. I tried everything to win their approval. I excelled academically, graduated summa cum laude, got a high-paying job in finance, achieved every conventional marker of success. Nothing worked. Jessica, who barely graduated college and bounced between jobs, was still the favored daughter. When I bought my first house at 25, my parents didn't even come to see it. When Jessica rented a studio apartment at 28, they helped her decorate and threw a housewarming party. The emotional neglect shaped my entire childhood and young adulthood. I learned to be self-sufficient because I couldn't rely on family support. I learned to validate myself because I'd never get validation from them. And I learned to question my worth because if your own family doesn't value you, maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with you. By the time I turned 30, I'd built a successful career, bought my own home, created a life completely independent of my family. I maintained minimal contact, obligatory appearances at holidays and birthdays, nothing more. I'd accepted that I'd never have the family relationship I'd wanted. Each interaction left me feeling emptier than the last, but I kept showing up, kept hoping something would change. Then came that birthday dinner. I didn't even want to have it, but my mother insisted, saying it would be nice for the family to celebrate together. I should have known better. Nothing involving Jessica was ever actually nice for me. The dinner was at my parents' house. About 20 relatives were there. Jessica arrived late, making a grand entrance like she always did, commanding everyone's attention. She was carrying a wrapped gift, and I felt a spike of anxiety even before she approached me. "Happy birthday, little sister," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I got you something very special. Something I think you've needed your whole life. She placed the wrapped box in front of me. Everyone was watching, expecting some heartfelt moment. I unwrapped it slowly, dread building in my stomach. Inside was a DNA ancestry kit. The kind you spit in and send off to discover your genetic heritage. And attached to it was a note in Jessica's handwriting: "Let's find out where you really came from." Because we all know it wasn't from Dad. The room went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then Jessica started laughing. I mean, come on, we've all wondered, right? She looks nothing like us. Acts nothing like us. Maybe this will solve the mystery of which stranger actually spawned our little Vivian. The laughter spread. My aunt giggled nervously. My cousin made a joke about me being the mailman's daughter. My uncle said something about family secrets finally coming to light. Each laugh felt like a physical blow, each mocking comment another wound. And my parents? They sat there in complete silence. Not defending me. Not telling Jessica her joke was cruel and inappropriate. Not acknowledging that publicly questioning my paternity at my birthday dinner was devastating. My mother wouldn't even look at me. My father stared at his wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. Their silence was deafening, more painful than the laughter around me. That silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just Jessica being cruel. She knew something. And my parents' refusal to defend me meant they knew it too. The pieces started clicking into place. The decades of differential treatment, the physical differences they'd never explained, the way family photos were carefully curated to minimize my presence. I picked up the DNA kit, looked at Jessica's smug face, and made a decision right there. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to run away. I was going to find out the truth. And I was going to use that truth as a weapon. "Thank you, Jessica," I said calmly. "This is actually a very thoughtful gift. I'll definitely be using this." Her smile faltered slightly. She'd expected tears, expected humiliation, expected me to break down. My composure clearly unsettled her. I saw confusion flash across her face, then something that looked almost like fear. I left that dinner early, the DNA kit in my purse and rage burning in my chest. At home, I immediately completed the test and sent it off. Then I started digging into my family history, looking for any clues about who my biological father might be if my suspicions were correct. I found old photo albums in my apartment, ones my grandmother had given me before she died. I studied every picture, looking for someone who resembled me. And I found him. Richard Hayes. My father's best friend from college. In photos from when I was a baby, Richard was always there. At my christening, at birthday parties, at family gatherings. He was around constantly until I was about 5 years old, then suddenly disappeared from all family photos and events. I looked like Richard. Same light hair, same facial structure, same build. The resemblance was undeniable once I was looking for it. How had I never noticed this before? Probably because I'd never had reason to look, never questioned the narrative I'd been fed my entire life. I researched Richard and discovered he'd moved across the country when I was 5. He'd gotten married, had his own family, built a successful business in commercial real estate. He'd created a completely separate life far away from us. The DNA results came back 3 weeks later. The ancestry portion confirmed what the photos had suggested. I had different genetic markers than what would be expected if my legal father was my biological father. But more importantly, the test connected me to several DNA matches who turned out to be Richard Hayes' relatives. I was Richard's biological daughter. My mother had had an affair with my father's best friend. I was the product of that affair. And my entire family had known and kept it secret for 30 years. The betrayal was suffocating. Not just my mother's affair, but the decades of lies. The favoritism toward Jessica suddenly made horrible sense. She was my father's biological child, I wasn't. I was the living reminder of my mother's infidelity, the walking evidence of her betrayal that they couldn't erase but could certainly punish. But instead of breaking down, I got angry. Furious. These people had made me feel like I was fundamentally flawed my entire life. They'd let me question my worth, my place in the family, my very existence. All while knowing the truth that would have explained everything. I contacted Richard Hayes. It was the hardest phone call I've ever made. I explained who I was, what I'd discovered, and asked if he'd be willing to do a paternity test to confirm. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, "I've been waiting for this call for 25 years. Yes, Vivian. I'm your biological father. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." We met in person 2 weeks later. Richard was kind, apologetic, and visibly emotional. He explained the whole story. He and my mother had a brief affair 30 years ago. When she got pregnant, they did a paternity test. Richard was the father. But my mother chose to stay with my legal father and asked Richard to step away completely. "I wanted to be in your life," Richard told me, tears in his eyes. "I wanted to know you, to be your father. But your mother said it would destroy the family, that it was better for everyone if I just disappeared. So I did. I moved away, started over, tried to build a new life. But I've thought about you every single day." The pain in his voice was genuine. He'd been forced out of my life before he ever had a chance to be my father. And I'd spent 30 years feeling unwanted by the man who'd raised me, never knowing my biological father wanted me desperately. "Why didn't you fight?" I asked, anger creeping into my voice. "Why didn't you try to be part of my life?" "I should have," he admitted. "I was young, scared, and your mother was very convincing about the damage it would cause. She said your father had agreed to raise you as his own if I disappeared. I thought I was doing the right thing. But I've regretted it every day since. Right now, thousands of you are watching this video, consuming my pain, my family trauma, my deepest betrayal. You're getting entertainment from the worst moments of my life. And most of you won't even hit the like button. You won't leave a comment. You won't engage at all. You'll just take what I'm giving you and leave. If hearing about a woman discovering at age 30 that her entire life was based on a lie doesn't move you to even click a button, I honestly don't know what's wrong with you. But go ahead. Keep scrolling. Keep consuming without contributing. That seems to be what most people do anyway. I spent 2 weeks processing everything with Richard. He was everything I'd needed in a father, supportive, interested in my life, proud of my achievements. In 2 weeks, he gave me more validation than I'd received in 30 years from the man who'd raised me. But I also felt betrayed by Richard. He'd known about me my entire life and never fought to be in it. He'd accepted my mother's demand that he disappear. He'd chosen his own comfort over knowing his daughter. When I told him how I'd discovered the truth, Jessica's cruel joke at my birthday, his expression darkened. "She knew?" he asked, his voice sharp with anger. "Apparently everyone knew except me. That's unconscionable. You deserve to know the truth. You've been living a lie your entire life because the adults around you were too cowardly to tell you." He paused, then said something that changed everything. "Vivian, what your mother and her family did to you, the decades of emotional abuse, the favoritism, the lies, that caused you real harm. Measurable psychological damage. Have you considered legal action?" Legal action? A lawsuit. For the emotional distress, the intentional infliction of emotional harm, the fraud of concealing your paternity. You have grounds. Especially now that you have DNA evidence and my testimony. The idea had never occurred to me. But as Richard explained it, I realized he was right. My family's actions had caused genuine, documented harm. The favoritism, the neglect, the lies, all of it had shaped my mental health, my sense of self, my entire life trajectory. I contacted a lawyer specializing in family law and emotional distress cases. I explained everything, the decades of differential treatment, the public humiliation at my birthday, the concealed paternity, all of it. The lawyer was immediately interested. This is a strong case. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud by concealment, potentially even intentional interference with inheritance rights depending on your father's estate planning. And you have DNA evidence, witness testimony, and documented patterns of behavior. How much are you thinking? I want them to feel it. I want consequences that actually matter. 2 million. We sue your mother, your legal father, and your sister for their roles in the decades-long fraud and abuse. We cite the DNA results, the public humiliation, the measurable psychological harm. We make it clear this isn't just family drama, it's actionable legal wrongdoing. I filed the lawsuit 2 months after my birthday. My family was served with papers at their home on a Saturday morning. Jessica called me within an hour, screaming. Are you insane? You're suing us? Over what, a joke at your birthday? Over 30 years of emotional abuse, Jessica. Over being lied to about my paternity my entire life. Over the public humiliation you orchestrated. Over the measurable psychological harm your favoritism and cruelty have caused. Pick one. This is insane. Mom and Dad are devastated. They should have thought about that before spending 30 years lying to me. You're not going to win. No court is going to award you $2 million because your feelings were hurt. We'll see. She hung up. My parents tried calling next, but I didn't answer. Their voicemails progressed from angry to manipulative to desperate. My mother cried about how I was destroying the family. My father accused me of being vindictive and cruel. They tried having relatives call to convince me to drop the lawsuit. I blocked every number. I was done being manipulated. The legal process took 8 months. My lawyer gathered evidence methodically. Medical records showing my history of anxiety and depression, which could be linked to childhood emotional neglect. Testimony from therapists about the psychological impact of differential treatment and concealed paternity. Statements from relatives who'd witnessed the favoritism over the years. And Richard's testimony about the affair, the paternity, and the decision to conceal it. My family fought back viciously. They hired expensive lawyers who tried to get the case dismissed, claiming it was just family conflict, not actionable harm. They argued that parents had discretion in how they treat their children, that there was no legal requirement to disclose paternity, that my claims of abuse were exaggerated. But my lawyer demolished their arguments. He showed that the pattern of behavior went beyond normal parental discretion into intentional emotional harm. He demonstrated that concealing paternity while allowing me to be publicly mocked for not resembling the family constituted fraud and infliction of distress. He presented expert testimony about the documented psychological damage I'd suffered. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I had to sit in a courtroom and recount every painful memory, every instance of being made to feel less than, every moment of favoritism toward Jessica. I had to describe the birthday incident in excruciating detail, with Jessica sitting 10 feet away looking furious. One particularly brutal day of testimony stands out. My lawyer asked me to describe specific instances of differential treatment. I talked about my high school graduation, where my parents left early to attend one of Jessica's cheerleading competitions. I talked about my college acceptance, celebrated with a dinner at a chain restaurant, compared to Jessica's acceptance party with 50 guests. I talked about job promotions Jessica never acknowledged, achievements my parents never displayed, milestones that passed without recognition. How did this pattern of treatment make you feel? My lawyer asked. Like I was fundamentally unlovable, I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay composed. Like there was something wrong with me that I couldn't fix. Like I would never be good enough no matter what I achieved. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint me as oversensitive, as someone who'd misinterpreted normal family dynamics. But when my therapist testified about the documented anxiety, depression, and self-worth issues stemming from childhood emotional neglect, that narrative fell apart. Jessica testified that she'd meant the DNA kit as a joke, that she hadn't realized it would hurt me so badly. She claimed she didn't actually know for certain about my paternity, that it was just family speculation she'd been making fun of. But my lawyer produced text messages between Jessica and our mother from years ago, explicitly discussing my different paternity and how they needed to keep it secret from me. The texts proved Jessica had known the truth for at least 5 years and had been using it to torment me privately before making it public at my birthday. One message from Jessica to our mother read, "Does she really not know? How has she never figured out she doesn't look like Dad? It's almost sad how clueless she is." Our mother's response, "Let's keep it that way. The less she knows, the easier for everyone." Seeing those texts read aloud in court was devastating. The casual cruelty, the amusement they took in my ignorance, the deliberate decision to keep me in the dark, all of it laid bare for a courtroom full of strangers. My mother testified, crying, saying she'd kept the secret to protect the family, to protect me from the pain of knowing. She claimed everything she'd done was out of love. My lawyer asked her directly, "If you were acting out of love, why did you treat Vivian so differently from Jessica? Why did you allow your daughter's achievements to be dismissed while celebrating Jessica's mediocre accomplishments? Why did you sit silently while Jessica publicly humiliated Vivian?" My mother had no good answer. She stammered something about different children having different needs. The jury's expressions made clear they weren't buying it. Richard testified about the affair, the paternity, and the agreement to disappear from my life. He was emotional, apologetic, and clearly guilt-ridden. "I should have fought to be in Vivian's life," he told the court. "I was a coward, and she paid the price for my cowardice and her mother's lies." The judge took 2 days to deliberate. When we returned for the verdict, my entire family looked confident. They thought they'd win, thought the judge would dismiss my claims as a family squabble that didn't belong in court. The judge read his decision. He found in my favor on every count. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, proven. Fraud by concealment, proven. The decades of differential treatment combined with the concealed paternity constituted a pattern of behavior that caused measurable, compensable harm. Total damages awarded, $2 million. $1 million from my parents jointly, $1 million from Jessica personally for the birthday incident and years of targeted cruelty. Additionally, the judge ordered the seizure of Jessica's primary assets to ensure payment, her condo, her car, her investment accounts. Everything she'd built would be liquidated to pay what she owed me. The courtroom erupted. Jessica started screaming that it wasn't fair, that I was destroying her life. My mother collapsed in her chair sobbing. My father just stared at me with what looked like a mixture of shock and hatred. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. These people had made my life hell for 30 years. Now they'd face real consequences for their actions. The aftermath was brutal for them. Jessica lost her condo when it was seized and sold to pay the judgment. She had to move into a tiny apartment, lost most of her possessions, and declared bankruptcy trying to manage the remaining debt. Her social circle abandoned her when the story became public. Nobody wanted to associate with someone who'd been found liable for intentionally abusing her sister for decades. My parents had to take out a second mortgage on their house to pay their portion of the judgment. They faced social consequences too. Friends and extended family who'd watched them favor Jessica for years finally had confirmation that their treatment of me was as bad as it had seemed. Some relatives supported my decision. My cousin Sarah called to tell me she'd always known something was wrong with how they treated me, that she was glad I'd finally stood up for myself. My uncle reached out to apologize for laughing at the birthday dinner, saying he'd been uncomfortable but too cowardly to speak up. Others called me vindictive and cruel for destroying my own family over money. But I didn't care what they thought. This was never about money. This was about accountability. The $2 million went into investments and savings. I used some of it to pay for extensive therapy to work through the trauma of my childhood and the shock of discovering my paternity. I donated a portion to organizations that support children in foster care and adoption situations, kids who, like me, grew up feeling like they didn't belong. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching people who'd treated me as disposable realize they couldn't get away with it anymore. It was seeing Jessica face actual consequences instead of skating by on charm and favoritism. It was my parents finally understanding that their lies and neglect had caused real, measurable damage. Richard and I built a relationship slowly. It was complicated and sometimes painful, but there was genuine affection there. He introduced me to his other children, my half-siblings, who welcomed me warmly. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to have family members who actually wanted me around. My relationship with my legal father never recovered. He sent one email after the trial, saying he'd done his best to raise me as his own despite knowing I wasn't his biological child, and that I was ungrateful and cruel for destroying the family. I didn't respond. His best had been emotional neglect and silent complicity in my mother's favoritism. That wasn't worth gratitude. 2 years after the trial, I'm thriving. I have a chosen family of friends and supportive people who value me. I have a relationship with my biological father that, while imperfect, is based on honesty and mutual respect. I have financial security and the satisfaction of knowing I fought back against people who tried to make me feel worthless. Jessica tried to reach out once, about a year after the trial. A long email claiming she'd been in therapy and realized how badly she'd treated me, asking if we could start to rebuild our relationship. I read it twice looking for genuine remorse and found only self-pity and justification. She was sorry her actions had consequences. She wasn't sorry for the actions themselves. That distinction mattered. I didn't respond. Some relationships are too damaged to rebuild. Some people have shown you exactly who they are too many times to ever trust them again. The birthday incident where Jessica gave me that DNA kit was meant to humiliate me, to remind me I didn't belong, to put me in my place. Instead, it gave me the ammunition to destroy her financially and expose the lies our family had been living for decades. Her cruelty became her downfall. And I don't feel bad about that for a second. People ask if I regret the lawsuit, if the $2 million was worth losing my family over. But I didn't lose my family. I escaped people who'd been abusing me for 30 years. The money was just the compensation for damages they'd caused. The real prize was freedom. I wake up every day not wondering why my parents don't love me as much as Jessica. I don't question my worth based on their rejection. I don't carry the weight of trying to earn affection from people who were never going to give it. That's worth more than $2 million. That's worth everything. My name is Vivian. My sister mocked me with a DNA test that exposed I wasn't my father's biological child, and I used that revelation to sue my family for $2 million for decades of emotional abuse and fraud. I won. And I'd do it again without hesitation. Because the truth is powerful. Evidence is powerful. The legal system, when used correctly, can provide justice that interpersonal dynamics never will. Jessica thought I was powerless. She thought public humiliation would break me. She thought wrong. The look on her face when the judge ruled in my favor, when she realized she was losing everything, I'll remember that for the rest of my life. Not with joy, exactly. But with deep satisfaction that consequences finally caught up with someone who'd spent 3 decades escaping them. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Sometimes it's just justice waiting for the right moment. Here we are at the end of my story, and I bet most of you still haven't subscribed. You've watched a woman describe losing her entire family, discovering she was lied to for 30 years, and fighting a legal battle that exposed her deepest trauma. You've consumed every painful detail. And you still can't click a button? You still can't leave a comment sharing your own story or even just acknowledging mine? I've given you 30 minutes of my pain, and you can't give me 2 seconds of engagement? That's really who you want to be? Someone who takes and never gives back. Fine. Keep watching. Keep consuming. Keep being that person. But for those of you who actually have empathy, who understand what it means to support someone who's shared something this personal, the subscribe button is right there. Show me this mattered to you. Or prove me right about exactly who most people really are. Now I want to hear from you, if you're brave enough to actually engage instead of just lurking. Have you discovered family secrets that changed everything? Have you dealt with favoritism that made you question your worth? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Drop your story in the comments below because sharing these experiences helps others who are going through similar pain. And subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because I'll keep sharing stories about family betrayal, legal justice, and what happens when people who've been abused finally fight back. These stories are for everyone who's ever been the scapegoat, everyone who's been lied to by the people who should protect them, everyone who knows that sometimes the only way to heal is to burn down the structures that hurt you and build something new from the ashes. You are not defined by how your family treated you. You are not responsible for their lies or their cruelty. And you absolutely have the right to seek justice, even when that justice destroys relationships that were never healthy to begin with. This is Vivian, reminding you that DNA doesn't make family, love and respect do, and when those are absent, you owe nothing, not forgiveness, not silence, not protection from consequences they earned through their own actions.